Hi, everybody. Good morning. Today, we're going to be reading the second half of Katie Pearson's famous Facebook post, Polite Society. For our opening Do Now routine, we're going to be revisiting the image we saw on day one. We're going to be adding to our explanation of this image, hopefully using some of the new vocabulary that we learned this week. Words like activist, words like bystander, words like protest. Before we jump into the reading, we'll be completing a before reading fill-in-the-blank activity to build on our understanding of the text, as well as to practice using new vocabulary words. Today's purpose. Today we are going to conclude our reading of Polite Society. Let's read to see how the author transitions towards advocating her support for activists. Once again, there's a link to an audio recording of the text, as well as a link to the text itself, the second half of the text, including the guiding reading questions for students to work on while they are reading to help them check for their understanding. Following the reading, there's 2 discussion questions for students to respond to that students could work on either independently before sharing out or in partners. Some of these questions may be challenging for the students, so it may be important to possibly review the questions before asking students to work on their own or with a partner, and then having students share out at the end of the activity. Following the reading, there's an after reading activity called Raft Writing. This is an important activity for students to help students understand the context of what they're reading, and to think about a text critically, to think about the role of the writer, the author's point of view, who the text is designed to be written towards, the format of it, how the format of a Facebook post might be different than a formal essay. There's a number of closing and connecting activities. You could check for students' understanding by asking what the author's purpose was in writing this. Students can make connections to the text to see if this post still applies, in their opinion, to what's going on in our society today. Students could write an imaginary response, an imaginary Facebook comment to the author of this post. And finally, there's an extending the learning activity, asking students what they feel they should stand up for. That extending the learning activity is important for students to complete today because they'll be continuing on that topic in tomorrow's day 5. Cumulative activity. One thing to point out is that if students need additional understanding, grasping the Black Lives Matter movement, there's links to 2 YouTube videos, and there's many more on YouTube that could easily be searched for, depending on the age of your students, as well as a link to an ENL lesson on the Black Lives Matter topic that was introduced in yesterday's video as well, and it's included in the video adapted resources folder, and there's a link to it here as well. So at this time, we could jump into today's lesson. Can somebody please read today's essential question? Good. How do we stand up for ourselves and for others? Again, we're on this topic about standing up for others, being an activist. Can somebody please read today's 2 lesson objectives? Good. To prepare for and participate in a range of collaborations with diverse partners, and to use context clues, collaboration, and resources to analyze words and phrases. Good. We're going to be having discussions with our peers, as well as performing a close reading of today's text. Now we'll be revisiting an image that we had seen in the day 1 lesson of this week. And we'll once again be asking students, what do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? Students should see if their understanding of this image has increased during the week, and if they can use any of the vocabulary words that they have learned during this week to respond to this image. At this time, you could pause the video and give your students a chance to further respond to this image. Students may say, in the image, I see activists, holding up signs that say Black Lives Matter. Some may say, I think that. They are protesting and are not bystanders. Students may say, one thing I wonder is, where and when did this protest take place? Now, this is a before reading activity for your students to complete, and this is, I think, good practice helping your students build their basic English understanding before jumping into today's text. So this may be a fun activity to do as a class and to help them gain some additional understanding of today's text. Once again, teachers could, as well at this time, provide any additional information regarding the Black Lives Matter movement that may be beneficial in helping students understand today's text if the topic hadn't been addressed in the previous lesson. Now here's a link to both an audio recording of the text as well as a link to today's text, including the guiding reading questions. Following the reading, students could complete the discussion questions on the weekly student handout paper. So as you can see, the guiding questions are included directly on the text, and these should be answered during the reading. While following the reading, there's 2 further discussion questions for students to respond to. Following the reading, there's a text analysis activity called Raft Writing. And this activity gives students a chance to kind of analyze the text in a critical way and to think, who is this person writing for? What is their motive? Why choose the Facebook format? Why not write it in a magazine? Why not send a letter? Why not record a video? Why did they choose this format? And if they feel that Facebook was an appropriate medium or an appropriate site to post the content that they posted. So this could raise some important discussions about the author's decision in creating that text. And it's important for students to understand that every text has some kind of context in which it was written and a goal that the author is trying to achieve in creating that text. What is the author's purpose? Is it to inform, to entertain, to raise awareness? So it's important for students to start to consider the role of the author and the author's purpose when they're reading new texts. Finally, there's a number of closing and connecting activities that the teacher could select from. There is an additional check for understanding question. What was the author's purpose for writing this message? What did the author hope to intend by writing this? Again, that question is a good follow-up from the previous Raft Writing activity. Students could make connections and they could say whether the message is still relevant today, what parts of it are relevant, and what parts may no longer be relevant. Students could pretend that they're writing a comment on the post, thanking the author for sharing her voice, maybe responding in additional ways about parts that they liked or comments that they would want to make on portions maybe they disagreed with. Finally, there's an extending the learning activity. It's important for students to look at this question today because this question will be picked up on and further developed in the following lesson, the Day 5 activity. Once again, students could record their answers on this weekly handout. So at this time, students could begin jumping into the before reading activity, and I hope your students will enjoy discussing the second portion of this famous text, Polite Society. Enjoy the lesson.